if you knew that a deflationary collapse was coming, you would front run it. And I think that's what they've done. They've printed all of this money knowing that a deflationary collapse is coming. And that's good for people. Like people that want prices to come down, that is deflation. So just so people understand that. But that also means stocks and real estate and all of these assets that people are invested in drop substantially also. I think you're going to see a 50% drawdown across most global markets when the reverse carry trade unwinds. And that is what I think the catalyst is going to be. And I think I would put a 95% likelihood it's going to happen here in 2025.
Good to meet you, man. Look, it's just gone 8 a.m. here, so I'm from the future. So if you ever want to ask me anything that's happened,
is it different? Is XRP's price above $3 again?
I'll tell you, okay, not the other way around. All right, you just let me know what you need to know. It's good to meet you, man. Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely, dude. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Been watching a bunch of your stuff, and I don't know if this show would get as technical as what you may like it. I'm a kind of a newbie to all of this, but I've been inspired by a lot of your videos, and you've given me a lot of hope about, I guess, yeah, cryptocurrency, but yeah, XRP in particular. So, thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have a pretty high conviction. Try to share that with people, and people seem to like it. So, keep doing it, and we'll find, I just got off with a VC, and he's got pretty large allocation to Figure. He has the second highest performing venture capital firm or fund in history.
Wow.
And it may end up being the number one. But anyway, he has a bunch of hash token, and I was like, "You bullish on hash?" And he was like, "Yes, like very."
Really?
They're one of the largest holders also. So,
wow.
That's the only thing I've bought in the last 3 years that wasn't XRP.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you catch me up on how you kind of like got into all of this? How early did you get wind of cryptocurrency and the change in technology and all that sort of space? How did you kind of get into it?
So 2020, I was saving for a house for my wife and I. And anyway, market fell, wasn't in crypto. I wish I had got crypto at the bottom of the market in 2020. But I got into stocks, and I rode that back up. And, just Facebook, Amazon, Tesla, Google. And picked pretty good there. Didn't get the bottom of the stock market, but was close. And so those doubled pretty quickly, and was, middle of 2020, I started to look to de-risk from that. And that's when I found crypto. I watched a debate between Peter Schiff and a Bitcoin guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you're, a fan of Austrian economics and gold and silver and precious metals, but I was looking to de-risk and get into commodities. And anyway, watched that, and that's when I understood what crypto was. And I went in heavy. I took everything that I made in the stock market and I rolled it all into crypto. Went pretty deep on 13 different positions. I got in Theta and VeChain and Cardano and XLM and XRP and Quant. I think I got Quant at like $9. So anyway, timing was good. I don't think I'm smarter than anybody else, but just evaluated cryptos kind of like I do companies. Looked for partnerships and use case and total addressable market for the problem they were trying to solve. We still really don't have utility even at this point. Still all speculative, but those did pretty good during the alt season. And with the profits there, I didn't want to mess it up. Went to school for finance, but I know that I know what I don't know, and there's a lot that I don't know. So I tried to surround myself with people that are experts in certain areas, and I called all across the U.S. to try to find tax attorneys and CPAs and accountants and people that could help me mitigate taxes and set up my estate. Talked to a lot of wealth managers that told me to sell it and bring it over there, and they would manage it. But I believe in the asset class, and so we ended up building our own wealth management, um, and that's what we have today. So we have Digital Ascension Group, that is a multifamily office specializing in crypto. Digital Wealth Partners is a subsidiary that is an SEC-registered RIA. We hold clients' assets at Anchorage. We generate returns on XRP for our clients there, close to $750 million in AUM.
Oof.
Um, and it's been just a wild 3 years since 2022, which is when I really started talking about all this stuff online.
Mm. What made you so bullish on XRP as opposed to any other cryptocurrency that's out there?
Well, where do you want to start? How long do you have? I mean, the use case, right? So the killer app for payment, or the killer app for crypto is payments.
Mhm.
So you have a few digital assets that fulfill, something in that niche. You got, XRP, XLM are really the only thing that have softwares built on top of those networks that are ISO compliant. The assets themselves are not ISO compliant, but the software and the Stellar and then Ripple and there's a few others building on the XRPL that allow for payments leveraging XRP.
Mhm.
Um, and so if you listen to Greg Kidd, if you listen to David Schwartz, if you listen to Brad Garlinghouse, there's a lot of people that have come and gone from Ripple that have been moved into very strategic locations globally. Um, Not just domestic here in the US, but internationally as well, that lead me to believe, again, valuing these assets and looking at them like I would a company. What's the use case and total addressable market? If you wanted a global bridge currency, so if you just Google that, Google will tell you that's XRP.
Mhm.
Um, that's pentillions of dollars. Like it's hard to comprehend the
Yeah.
amount of value that network or system would have to move. And so, even though there's 100 billion XRP and it seems like there's a lot of supply, if you wanted it to be a reasonable price for people, you would need a pretty significant supply. And you would need a treasury mechanism to be able to hold price stability for periods of time to be able to, make sure that it worked in that application. So people are frustrated about Ripple and their position and the non-volatility that XRP has, where it's sideways for an extended period of time, but it's exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And people get mad that Ripple funds their business off of the sales of XRP. That's fine. If their long-term vision is for XRP to be global, bridge currency that sits in between all the sovereign currencies, and also, stock markets and derivatives and all of the other tokenized real world assets, I'm okay with that. I'll deal with that in the short term for the long term outcome.
Mhm.
Um, and so, there's lots and lots of reasons, but that's just kind of at a high level. If you had that much value moving over a protocol, and that's what it was meant to be, you can't help but be bullish on it.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you a couple of questions about that, but before I do, what do you say to someone that kind of like poo-poos Ripple and XRP as a shitcoin? Like I've interviewed because I have an interest in this and I've dabbled in the past over the years and I've lost. Like I've ended up getting caught up in some fucking Ponzi scheme that's just trying to extort people into buying what you
Sure.
think is Bitcoin or something like that, right? But I've interviewed like guys like Mark Moss, Robert Breedlove,
Mhm.
yeah, like Efrat Fenixon, like these guys are really, really bullish on Bitcoin and they fucking rubbish everything else. They just say like everything else is not decentralized. It's just a shit coin. They really have placed no weight on XRP. What do you say to people like that? I'm sure you get pushback like that all the time.
Yeah, look, I think I'm in a unique position. I have a lot of respect for those guys. Um, you know, there's a lot of people that are very intelligent when it comes to macroeconomics that believe in Bitcoin like wholeheartedly.
Mm.
Um, and they're not wrong, right? Like there's 21 million in the supply. There are multiple miners that validate transactions across the network. There are periods of time when it becomes consolidated, when the price drops and people go out of business because they can't get cheap enough energy to continue mining. And there's a consolidation of the miners during the bear market. There's a real world application for the energy component of Bitcoin and the ability to turn up and down, the consumption across the miners. And I think eventually that infrastructure could be repurposed for something else. If they're using the ASICs to mine the Bitcoin, I mean, it's etched in those cards. And so it would be difficult to repurpose that. ETH early on, before it migrated to proof of stake, a lot of that infrastructure has actually been repurposed for AI and decentralized compute. But I'm bullish on Bitcoin. I don't know that we have much more in this cycle. But over the long term, if we continue to see an influx of interest from governments and institutions, I'm concerned about Tether, and they don't like to talk about Tether. People that are bullish on Bitcoin, there's almost a direct correlation between Tether being minted and Bitcoin's price appreciation. Now, does correlation equal causation? Not always,
Mhm.
but I think in this case it does. And, I'm also concerned about Satoshi's wallet. Satoshi's wallet holds 1.1 million Bitcoin. If that were to move or get sold, it could cause pandemonium across the market. And they don't, again, these are things that they don't want to talk about, they don't want to address. I look at things holistically, and I think if I had made a bunch of money on Bitcoin, I probably would have biases also.
Sure.
So, I and if it was also part of my business model was a lot of XRP, right? I have a very strong conviction, and I've built a whole business around that. Mark Moss, he's working with one of our partners right now to do the returns on
Mhm.
XRP. I don't look at it as one coin to rule them all. I think there's a lot of different applications for blockchain payments. I think XRP fulfills the use case that Bitcoin aspired to fill. Um, and maybe it's not peer-to-peer payments. When the VCs got involved with Bitcoin in 2014, they didn't increase the block size. And that really kind of shackled Bitcoin from becoming a peer-to-peer decentralized currency. Bitcoin Cash, forked off of that, and a lot of people just didn't adopt that.
Mm.
And they stayed with the main chain. And so, they now have this narrative of digitized gold, basically. And yeah, I think that makes sense. You hold the bearer asset against cash or fiat, it definitely appreciates, I think, in perpetuity. If the debt-based system that currently exists continues to prevail, but if they, change this and they do back the currencies, the assets that are going to be moving that value and involved with that transition, I think are going to win out over Bitcoin for ROI and adoption over the long term.
Mm.
Um, and so that's my position. Again, I just feel like I'd rather stack my pennies next to the institution's dollars rather than buck the system like a lot of people do with Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. Do you have any concerns when you hear these Bitcoin maxis, they say things like Bitcoin is the only decentralized cryptocurrency, right? So for me personally, like I said, uh, like I'm a I'm a newbie to all of this. My brother got me into this. He's got like a good bag of XRP, a bunch of other coins and things like that. So I sort of started a little late off the back of his recommendations. So we talk about all of this all the time. Just while I'm thinking about that, I read a comment on your one of your latest YouTube videos, and someone said, "Man, being pre-rich is so frustrating, right? Like they're just watching your videos, waiting for this
Yeah.
fucking boom to happen." Anyway, back to my question. So the decentralized and centralized currency. So
Yep.
my concern with XRP, although I have invested in it, is almost like a double-edged sword. I'm happy. The thing that I don't like about Bitcoin is the whole Satoshi story. No one owns it, all this kind of stuff. It just, I don't know, it rings alarm bells in my mind. So
Mhm.
I feel like oh, no one owns this. Yeah, however they explain it. Anyway, I'll butcher how people explain how it all is. With XRP, and Ripple, I'm confident because there are, CEOs. There's a chain of command, so to speak. To say like this is who's in charge of the helm. There's all of these things that are going for it in that sense. However, I feel like as far as me wanting my freedoms, my sovereignty as an individual, because I can see how this is escalating into digital currency and how the world's changing. Um, I feel like I'm walking into the box of CBDCs and digital prisons that are being built like specifically around the Ripple and XRP
Mhm.
model. Does that make sense to
Yeah,
you?
yeah, 100%. So this argument comes up frequently,
Yeah.
right? So the XRPL is absolutely decentralized. There's 35 validators that vote on the network. You have to have an 80% consensus, actually 80% plus one, in order to pass a new amendment, which is actually more than Bitcoin, which is a 51% consensus across the network. There's, definitely there are more miners on the Bitcoin network than there are validators on the XRPL, but there's, over 300 validators on the XRPL, and 35 of those are what make up the governance and the voting mechanism across the network.
Mhm.
And those are known entities, right? That means all the other validators know who those are, and they've affirmed that they are willing to allow them to vote on their behalf. Very similar to like the U.S. government with senators. People vote in their jurisdiction for their senator that sits on a board seat, and then they vote as a proxy for them, right? So I actually think that the governance mechanism on the XRPL is more robust and better situated for global adoption than Bitcoin, and it is decentralized. Even though people want to say that Ripple controls the network, they only run three validators on the network. There's other validators that are run by the SEC, other enforcement agencies, institutions, universities, MIT, Stanford, many others run validators on the XRPL. So that's a misnomer, for one. Also, if you wanted to own something that can't be controlled, XRP is that thing. It cannot be frozen. It cannot be clawed back. They can never mint more of them. The origin account on the XRPL is black holed, so nobody has access to it. So if you own XRP, even in this world where there are issued assets that other people control and have smart contracts around, owning XRP gives you that sovereignty that people are looking for. And again, there's just so much FUD from Bitcoin people around XRP. The people that built Bitcoin also built XRP. I
Right.
think it's going to be extremely enlightening for a lot of people when that actually comes out.
Mhm.
Um, and for the Bitcoin people, that's going to be a hard pill to swallow. Um, they looked at all the things that were wrong, quote unquote, with Bitcoin, and I think they made XRP a better Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see how things shake out. Again, I'm just one guy. I have my opinions, right? Take it with a grain of salt. But I've had enough conversations to know I'm pretty confident in what I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I got you on the show. There's not too many other people that are um, saying the things that you're saying, which gives people inspiration and hope. But I guess, part of my frustration, I guess, with which market to kind of enter into and how bullish to go on it, depending on my income and how much I can sort of spare in terms of cash flow and things like that, is I guess I don't know when this mass adoption will happen. You got this
Right.
Ripple case that's been ever ongoing. It's just like, well, if it's all of the
Was
things that you say, like, what the fuck's going on? Like, why is it such a it's on again, off again, off again, on again? Like,
well,
it's never
it's
a
all the way over now. So they've paid the fine. Everything is
so.
done. The I think a lot of people thought that XRP would appreciate immediately after the case was over.
Yeah, for sure.
The problem with that thought pattern is that that would make it a security of Ripple. if it's a truly decentralized asset that's not influenced by Ripple's efforts and it's not a security of Ripple, it it can't be predicated on the case. It can't be predicated on announcements from Ripple. And people get frustrated by that. They're like, "Oh, there's all this good news, and I don't see any price appreciation, and now I'm frustrated. I'm going to sell it. And they're scammers."
Mhm.
It's going to be because of a global crisis where liquidity is needed,
Yep.
and that's the point where there will be a supply shock on XRP. It will be pushed to extremely high values, and that's when it'll be used to settle payments. And until then, just get used to it, hanging out and moving sideways, and you know, dollar cost average. You know what I mean? Like there's lots of times in Bitcoin's history where people were frustrated during bear markets where it sold off. You know, in the first bear market it was like 90%, and then like 85 to 82% in the second bear market, and then 75 plus drawdown in the third bear market. I still think we're in for 60+% drawdown on
Really?
Bitcoin, maybe even more than that in this bear market, depending on the ETFs exacerbated it on the way up, and they could do the exact same thing on the way down for Bitcoin. We've never had Bitcoin at an all-time high before the halving, and we did this cycle because of the ETFs. So if that tells you how much liquidity was moved in from those products, um, those people haven't endured a bear market. It's only been a bull market for Bitcoin while they've been
Sure.
buying these ETFs. If they saw a wick or a candle to the downside of 40% or 50%, they're not here to hodl.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Like they're
Love that.
not people holding the bearer asset. They're there to make returns. And if they get their legs chopped out from underneath them, they're selling. So that
Yeah.
adds huge amounts of downward pressure onto Bitcoin because now you're going to have all the investment banks dumping. You got MicroStrategy who's levered up at this point too. If it drops below 72,000, which is his average buy, he might have to start liquidating Bitcoin in order to, pay back some of the debt that they have.
Mhm.
So all of this is stacked up, and as long as it keeps going up and to the right, it's fine. When it doesn't, inevitably, because there will be a bear market for Bitcoin, it's going to be a bad day.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me more about these global regulations in terms of like how many coins is it going to wipe off the market, do you think? And like what does that mean for XRP?
I don't know that the regulations are going to wipe coins out. Um, if they were, they would have already done it, right? We've got MiCA. We've got regulations in almost every other country besides the U.S. We're just waiting on the Clarity Act. And you've just continued to see more and more of these assets be minted, all these meme coins. There's a bunch of stuff. Anybody can create a blockchain, right? It's a decentralized technology. You could copy Bitcoin today and launch your own network.
Yeah, right.
Um, I want to say it's going to be a liquidity crisis again, very similar to the reason for XRP's adoption in global markets to be able to settle those and provide liquidity in that scenario. When Tether gets rugged, which is what I think the whole intent behind Tether was the whole time,
Hmm.
um, many things will happen. It will, remove all of the riffraff and the stuff out there that's really not meant to be here. 99% of crypto goes to zero when that happens. The exchanges go illiquid and they go on sale. The investment banks step in and roll them up. And it allows a restructuring for, whatever was supposed to step into that position to roll in there.
Mm.
And whatever's got ETFs, they can pump liquidity into very quickly.
Yeah, sure. Do you
So
have a
we've
time
got,
frame as to when you think um like that'll all come about? Is that very soon, like in the next few months?
I mean, I have a public bet about XRP's price before the end of the year. So
Right.
I think so. I wouldn't make a public bet uh, without thinking that that was going to be the case.
Mm.
But yeah, there's a lot of macroeconomic events and constraints that currently point to that situation playing out here in 2025.
Yeah, right. What can you tell me about the ISO 2022 coins, whatever that the compliant coins that are going to be dominating in the next sort of 12 months or so? I don't know enough about it. I wouldn't mind your thoughts on it.
Well, so again, it's kind of a misnomer. There are no ISO compliant coins.
Really? What's that all about then?
Well, people like analogies and people want to categorize stuff, and I can appreciate that, right? It simplifies things. down to something that's kind of, easy to understand for the average person.
Sure.
But ISO 20022 is a messaging standard. So the way I could explain this, to most people, have you ever like downloaded something from one website or application and tried to upload it to another website and you had to put it in a CSV file in
Yeah.
Excel? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's structured data, and it has to be structured a specific way so it populates the right fields in the other application, right? Um, the banks need the same thing. All of these banks, when the messaging data, is sent, they used to just haphazardly put it in there however they wanted to. And now, just like the shipping container, they've standardized how all of them are going to structure that data. And this is the precursor to instant settlement. It doesn't automatically mean instant settlement. It just means faster payments because they don't have to reconcile the data, and would eventually lead to the ability to be able to settle real time. So a lot of people are excited about that because they've made that correlation. And then they, again, kind of branded certain assets that would settle real time or allow for real time payments in that bucket. So that would include HBAR, XLM, XRP, Algorand, IOTA, Quant, is over there as well. And there's, a robust infrastructure that those protocols could work alongside, not include, but work alongside to be able to allow banks and institutions to utilize this technology in a meaningful way. And so I think that's why people bucket those under that, ISO banner.
Right. Okay. So when it comes to the compliance issue, with respect to adoption, where do you see, just for the listener, and including myself, like as to where do you see that going in the near future? Because at the moment, much like the conversations I've had with these Bitcoin maxis, is like, look, it was, you can see the initial intent with Bitcoin. You can see that its utility was that we could replace the dollar, for example, or fiat currency. However, it's been utilized as a like a precious metal or a commodity. It's sort of like a store of value, up until the point that you had this mass adoption, which is what everyone's sort of waiting for. And how do you see that sort of playing out in the near future in terms of banks adopting that? Because here in Australia, like our four major banks are all toting CBDCs. Like they're sort of gearing up towards this digital future. In terms of at least an Australian currency. Um, However, yeah, I'm curious to understand as to where you see this mass adoption happening and what time frame, and then of course, what's that going to do to the price?
So now through 2030, I think you're going to see the tokenization of about 80 to 85% of every asset globally.
Wow.
And that'll start with, ironically, the most liquid assets and then move to the most illiquid assets. So we've already seen treasuries tokenized. We've seen stable coins, other currencies,
Hmm.
and that's where it's starting. And then they're going to move to stocks and bonds and other financial products. I think securities, there's an ability to trade them 24/7, 365. What the NASDAQ and many other markets here in the US are looking at is 24/5. So 5 days a week, 24 hours a day. Weekends are still off.
Hmm.
And I think that that's coming within the next 2 years. I think payments in that infrastructure goes first because it's kind of the bedrock. It's the layer that allows everything to scale on top of that. You've got to have custody in place. You have to have digital ID in place, credentials, KYC, AML, all of the stuff that banks require in order to provide these services. And we've just now got those things really solid.
Mm.
We talk with a lot of large banks. They have the infrastructure to be able to facilitate stuff for themselves. When it comes to retail, I don't know that you're going to see the type of adoption that many people were hoping for, where banks would be willing to hold your digital assets. It looks like the majority of the adoption for the investment side is going to come from structured products. We've got DATs and trusts that go public and ETFs and ETPs. where they're aggregating large amounts of the assets, and then you're able to invest through your stock portfolio or other qualified accounts. I think that that's where the majority of it's going to go.
Hmm.
And again, these exchanges being rolled up in the tether scenario, I think that that happens again sooner than later. So, you know, I think we're in for a Cambrian explosion, is how many people have described it
Yeah.
here at the end of 2025 and into early 26.
Yeah, right. Can you break that down for me? What do you mean by Cambrian explosion?
So I don't know, many people that are watching this may or may not have been around for the dot-com boom.
Hmm.
But when we had clear rules of the regulations here in the US for the internet, anybody and everybody was clamoring for creating some type of dot com. You
Sure.
had pets.com trading at crazy multiples before it collapsed on itself. And that, obviously that was a bubble. But I
Hmm.
think we've been through the bubble after Tether goes here in digital assets. And on the other side of that, I think, again, you'll be left with the winners, the things that will be around. And some of their prices might get decimated during that liquidity crunch. And you got old Uncle Warren sitting with, $400 billion on the sideline over here, ready to deploy that capital when the reverse
Wow.
carry trade unwinds. And I think, again, a lot of this is, I want to say orchestrated, but well timed for this to solve a lot of problems, increase the velocity of money, create efficiencies in the economy, jumpstart the economy so that we don't go into a depression when this all unwinds. If you have the culmination of AI and blockchain and 3D printing and all of these other things that happen at the same time and compound on each other also,
Mm.
uh, the GDP and growth of the world will be exponential. It'll move very quickly. It might eradicate some jobs, but there'll be lots of jobs that also come alongside that with these new technologies. Just as this happens with any other revolution. I think this is the fourth industrial revolution that we're about to enter, and yeah, that's the Cambrian explosion that I see. It's just going to be a huge amount of innovation in a very short period of time
Mm.
that people don't see coming.
Yeah. It's like what was that book you recommended? Um
The future is faster than you think.
yeah, yeah. Peter Diamandis, he sort of says like, there's a convergence of different technologies all happening at the same time, and you can see it. Like it's just all bubbling at the surface at the moment, but it's definitely a lot to take in, and it's very overwhelming, which is why I think a lot of people are just almost like a deer in the headlights. They just don't know which way to turn. When you mentioned a little while ago, you were talking with banks and they mentioned the digital ID and things like that. What's your position on the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years? I don't know what your take is with through the COVID period or like all of these kind of I guess you could call it strategic moves, you could call it, a planned event. I mean, most people that I talk to are leaning towards that, these designed on purpose and creating sort of moves in the market, and there's a significant wealth shift that I've experienced over the last 3 or 4 years, and I personally was on the downside of all of that in terms of business. Like, I've been a traditional business owner for 23 years or so. So what's your take on all of that? Do you have a personal opinion as to what position you stand in, and are you conflicted in some ways in terms of walking into digital ID and all of this sort of digital currency?
Um, yes and no. I think that there are inalienable human rights that we're supposed to have,
Hmm.
and this technology could be used in a very negative way. But there's lots of technologies that can be used in a very negative way,
Sure.
right? Like you're already in a surveillance state all the time. You have a cell phone, right? So listening to you, tracking you, like all of your data is already gone. They already got it. People think that they have privacy. If you have a cell phone, you do not have any privacy. The government's got your stuff. So all of these people that are, poo-pooing digital ID, I think that they're concerned that you'll end up with a social credit score like China, and that they'll be able to control your bank accounts and manipulate things and maybe do things that aren't so great. When things are immutable and on blockchain, those things are visible. and they can be watched and they can be governed. And I think there's a situation where citizens will have access to that information that's held proprietary by the government now. And if you had a checks and balance system like that, where things were visible that were being hidden or manipulated, it would keep people accountable. And so, even though this could be manipulated and used poorly, I think that there will be checks and balances put in place alongside of it that actually benefits general society and people. And I think that, UBI will be a thing. Do I agree with that? Nah, I don't know yet. It depends on how it's used, but the stimulus and everything else that was pumped around, how willing were people to take that?
Very.
Everybody took it,
Mm.
right? So they've already set us up. They've tested the water on that to see if people would have an appetite for it, and there absolutely is one.
Mm.
And people will say, well, that's a bad thing. Well, I don't know. If we did have enough GDP and a huge deflationary event, you could actually print currency in opposition to the deflation from the technology and the advancements that were happening for a period of time. You could use that to hold price stability across markets. You'd need an AI like Aladdin to be able to do that. But maybe that's kind of the goal here. And then they could direct spending across an economy. The reason that the Soviet Union failed and socialism and all of that didn't work was it was evenly distributed, and you couldn't find discrepancies across the economy like a capitalistic society would. When
Mm.
people see, gaps, they fill them because there's money to be made there. But if you had an AI that could analyze all the transactions across an economy, it could allocate and direct capital based on those discrepancies. And you could incentivize people to spend money in certain sectors of the economy before it was a problem or while it was a problem in order to shore things up. Do I like that? I like an open capitalistic society and free markets
Sure.
just as much as the next person. But I also believe that people are very emotional and markets tend to overreact both directions. And that's also where the opportunity is, right? Everybody gets scared and sells too much, or everybody gets too euphoric and buys too much.
Mhm.
And the people that can discern, when those times are happening are who gets the opportunity and can make a lot of money. But I think we'll have a regression to the mean. I think markets will be far less volatile on the other side of this stuff. I think, with AI, you could protect people from themselves a little bit. You need to walk a line with that. I'm
Mm.
not saying, again, this could all go very poorly if we don't
Yeah.
structure it the right way with the right governance.
Yeah, that's
But
the fear.
I do think, and I don't think it'll be a dystopian future or a utopian future. Um, it'll be somewhere in the middle of the bell curve. There will be good things and bad things, and it's human nature for us to be greedy, I
So
think. Um, and you can try to combat that as much as you can, but as long as humans are somewhat involved, there's going to be some issues. But I also don't want Skynet either. I don't
yeah,
want
that's
Terminator to take over and
yeah,
us to be in a slave society where AI runs the world. So I don't know. I don't have all the answers,
of course.
but I am hopeful that with the right governance around this stuff, it's going to be a lot better uh, society in the future. And I think that the standard of living for a lot of people will come up. The other thing about UBI that I think would be really cool, and you normally don't hear those two words in the same sentence,
No.
would be if you did have a standard of living and you got a stipend that could cover your rent and food every month. Imagine how much more freedom you would have as a person. You could pursue your passions and your interests. You wouldn't have to work that 9 to 5 and slave away in a debt-based system.
Hmm.
You could actually do podcasts or create art or music or all the things that people don't have time for because they're so consumed with their day-to-day job. So I think we could actually move into a period of like another renaissance, if this works out the way that I'm hopeful for.
Yeah, Uh, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I guess while you were talking, it's like I don't know what it's like in America, but in Canada and here in Australia, we have um like we have um fuck, what's it called? We call it the dole. Like, you know, like we have a government subsidy for people who are unemployed, unemployment benefits and
Yep.
things like that. So, you know, if you're a mother with children, you get a certain part payment, you
Yep.
know, all those sorts of things. And you know what? There's a portion of the population that will just always be on those benefits, and they choose to live their life. So, you know, the universal basic income is probably a
It's
substitute
already there
for
in
a
a
lot of
lot of
that. It's just going
applications.
to be rebranded.
What I like about, and this again, you're not going to hear like and CBDC in the same sentence very often,
Mm,
but in that you could build in smart contracts and you could see where they use that money, and you could also direct that money to be spent on specific things and not exchanged for drugs or other stuff that it shouldn't be exchanged for,
sure.
right? So the benefits that are paid to people, I think you need social programs. There
Mm,
are people that fall into bad times. I've been fired before and been on unemployment for a couple weeks,
sure.
but that helped me, get it back to another job, right? Like same thing for a single mom or somebody that's in a bad spot. If you have those social programs and they're used correctly, they can help somebody stand back up and be a productive member of society. I don't think that they should be able to be allowed to stay on that in perpetuity.
Mm,
And maybe there's durations, built into the smart contracts. But again, the governance piece, right? And who am I to say who gets how much for how long? I'm not that person. But I would like some of that around those things to make sure that the tax dollars I am paying are being put to the purposes that I would hope that they would be used for.
yeah, for sure. I mean, in an extension of that, do you think that when this is a mass adoption, it's got, you know, government backing, and you think that it would be more transparent to see what governments are spending on with
Doge.
our tax monies? Like it's, yeah, at the moment it's definitely smoke and mirrors. I know with
Well, just Elon's in the government right now auditing a bunch of stuff with Doge here in
yeah,
the
sure.
US. So I'm very hopeful that government spending gets put on blockchain. I would love to see where those tax dollars are going.
Fuck yeah.
And
Yeah.
if the public could see that and it was transparent and available, we would have a lot more confidence in the government's ability to spend that capital correctly. I think a lot of people that want to mitigate taxes and not pay any taxes, their main directive or reason for doing that is so because they believe that they can allocate the capital better than the
Yeah,
government.
that's right.
If I could give it to my community or I can put it in a charity and I can give back and help people and know where that money's spent and see a difference, I'm going to feel really good about that instead of handing it over to Uncle Sam or the parliament or whoever your governing body is and just watching maybe it gets put to use in the way that I was hoping it would. Like
Hmm.
that's why so many, you know, family offices and large wealthy people do have foundations and create charities and do a lot of philanthropic work
Correct.
in order to mitigate taxes, is they can actually see what the effect of that money is.
Mm, agreed. Can we switch gears and talk about self-custody? I mean, it's kind of scary for a few people, and I'm kind of in the process now of looking at self-custody. My brother has already made that move, but again, it's an eerie feeling, and I've watched YouTube videos of guys absolutely losing their mind because you know they're
Lost all their money.
yeah, a large portion of their wealth just disappears, you know.
It is radical responsibility when you take ownership of a bearer asset. So that could be gold in your home, that could be cash out of the ATM, it could be your crypto to a cold wallet.
Yep.
There are no counterparties to blame or recourse to be had when you do that, but you have complete control. So that's what people like about it. You're sovereign. You could fly anywhere in the world with it. It is in your pocket or in your mind if you remember your keys.
Hmm.
It's the first time in history that you can move that amount of value globally without a counterparty, which I think is incredible. However, it does come with a lot of risks and downside if you get it wrong.
Mm.
For me, my spouse has no clue on any of this stuff. Something happens to me, her and my kiddo, out of luck
Wow.
because she would not know what to do with it. So that's why I made the move to institutional custody with Anchorage, and we set everything up the way that we did. We create, a stock account, basically, a Schwab account for your digital assets. So you still have full control. It's an FBO account. It's in your name. It's segregated, bankruptcy remote, insured, separated out. You have visibility of it at all times. You could still travel and access the account from anywhere in the world. We're a countersigner, so there's the layer of governance around that to make sure that it's not sent anywhere that's not supposed to. You can whitelist a wallet, so if it did get hacked, which is highly, highly, highly unlikely, BlackRock wouldn't have moved their assets over to Anchorage if that was the case. But if it did, the only place they can send it back to is, guess what? Your cold wallet that you whitelisted. And that's why it's insured up to $100 million. Right.
Okay.
So I wanted the best of both worlds, similar to like I talked about, middle of the bell curve. There's people that are radical and want one way or the other, right? There's people that want no responsibility. There's people that want all the responsibility. I'm in the middle. I think that there's benefits to having institutional parties involved. But I also want my assurances that I still own the asset and I control what's going on. So we tried to blend that the best way possible and give people the best of both worlds, and I think we've achieved that.
Yeah, wow. That's interesting. I'll definitely, yeah, we'll have to look into something like that. Have you, in terms of like cold storage wallets, I think I've heard you recommend, is it Decent? Is that something that you still recommend
I do,
to
yeah. I like Decent. They can add a 25th, seed key phrase to the end of it, makes it a little bit more secure. It's got a biometric. It has a really good UI. It has a large breadth of assets on that one versus some of the other ones. It's not air gapped, but it's still got multiple layers of security around it. Not like an Elipal or Arculus or some of the other things out there.
Yeah.
I don't know that it has an app. I think you can only access it through your computer. And if you had a laptop or a desktop that was only used for your crypto, probably still as secure as something being air gapped. I think it's a great option for people that have lower amounts. The other thing, if you get over a couple $1,000,000 and it's in your desk drawer, like,
Yeah.
and I've even seen, there's some people that have the metal plates that they put the keys on. In California, when they had the fires, it was like a blowtorch on those metal plates, even when they were in a safe. Gone.
Really?
I know many people that lost millions of dollars.
Wow.
They'll never be able to recreate those wallets or access them again. So those are the risks you run, in that type of scenario. I had a bunch of fail safes when I had my stuff in personal custody. I had 12 different wallets. I had my key phrases in multiple locations. There was, a system to that, but that takes a lot of mental effort. And again, you need, trust somebody else, your crypto buddy or somebody, if, your spouse or whoever your loved one is doesn't know much about this and you want to take care of them. If you have it in a trust, this is the wild thing. So an asset protection trust here in the US, you have a distribution trustee and they have to sign off on assets being removed, because if there's creditors coming after you, they basically tell them to pack sand, can't have anything. So that's how robust that trust is. If you had crypto in there before we had institutional custody, you would write your keys on a piece of paper, tear it in half, and give them half the keys.
Wow.
And you would have to recreate the wallet every time that you needed to move something.
Fuck.
Yeah. How,
Yeah.
buckle your butthole a little bit, every time you had to delete it and recreate it.
As if life's not stressful enough already, and you got to add that.
Exactly. So anyway, again, that is for some people. Some people can remember all those key phrases in their head, all 24 of them. And, you're locked and sealed. You can go anywhere in the world, recreate your wallet, and that's how you carry your money. And again, I think that that's incredible that you're able to be that sovereign and do that. But it does require a special person to be that level of responsibility and want that level of sovereignty.
In a bunch of your videos, you mentioned some sort of catalyst, an event, something that's going to be the reason that cryptocurrencies either initially fall to the ground and then obviously spike. So everyone's after these God candles and what's going to trigger this rise, and all the rest of it. But what would be the likelihood of an event happening inside of 2025, and what do you think that would be? Because just my own outside layman's perspective is you can definitely see something is shifting economically, in terms of, we have this ever increasing inflation. I've heard you talk about deflation in a bunch of videos and things like that. But then you've got mounting debt. Like I know the US is in whatever it
37
is,
trillion.
$37 trillion in debt. Australia's fucking cooked. Like we have spent money like no tomorrow and continue to throw, billions of dollars away. So
Well,
it's anyway, what are your thoughts on all of that?
if you knew that a deflationary collapse was coming, you would front run it. And I think that's what they've done. They've printed all of this money knowing that a deflationary collapse is coming. And that's good for people. Like people that want prices to come down, that is deflation.
Hmm.
So just so people understand that. But that also means stocks and real estate and all of these assets that people are invested in drop substantially also. I
Mm.
think you're going to see a 50% drawdown across most global markets
Wow.
when the reverse carry trade unwinds. And
Okay.
that is what I think the catalyst is going to be. And I think I would put a 95% likelihood that it's going to happen here in 2025. Um, the Fed lowered interest rates the last FOMC meeting here in September.
Hmm.
And Japan, the conjecture was that they would raise interest rates, the Bank of Japan would. They held them because they know as soon as they start raising again, all of it's unwinding.
Sure.
And they really, don't have much option. Their bond rates are continuing to rise. You've got the 10-year yield there in Japan is at 1.675. It's the highest it's been in 20 plus years.
Hmm.
Same thing on the 30-year yield. It's over 3%, I believe. It continues to rise. They're going to have to raise interest rates from 50 where they have them today. And
Right.
they want to pull out of this. They've been in stagflation for decades. I'm excited for Japan. The Nikkei's at an all-time high. I think it'll continue. I think it'll have pull down, but then they'll move into a. I think again globally we will move into a bull market after a very sharp pullback because of the reverse carry trade and a global credit call. And again, I do think that I'd put a 95% likelihood that that happens this year in 2025.
Mm. The thing that comes to mind though, Jake, is like in Australia, I think some are predicting that we're probably going to shift somewhere between 50 and 75 base points downwards in terms of interest rates. But in the past, prior post GFC, we've just seen markets continue to climb. So like every time the rates are dropped, it frees up capital and cash flow, and everyone starts spending again. It kind of like has this. Um,
Stimulus. Yeah,
yeah, well, it's a stimulus. Yeah, exactly right. But it's a false economy, like it just
yeah.
extends the pathway to doom. Like it just keeps pushing it further and further out.
Well, the central banks have two levers that they can currently pull. So it's print money or decrease money, M2 money supply, and they can't directly affect the velocity of money. The lever that they can pull is interest rates.
Sure.
So if they raise interest rates, people tend to hoard cash. They move to risk off. They're not going to deploy capital because they're concerned that some people might go illiquid and they can't refinance their debt because they know people take leverage. When
Mm.
they come down, people take out more money. It's free, free your money. It's cheaper money. Refinance what we have going on. So it causes spending. But the spending is actually the effect of that is velocity of money across an economy. Well, if you had a technology that could exacerbate the velocity of money across an economy, that you were going to roll out and move to real time payments and allow people to exchange money faster,
Mhm.
you would actually need to drastically reduce M2 money supply very quickly to be able to offset that. Otherwise, you would have a significant amount of inflation.
Sure.
Um, more money moving around the economy tends to make things a higher price. We saw that in 2020 very quickly. Watches and everything else, after the stimulus became much more expensive.
Mm.
Homes, real estate, a lot of it still hasn't come back down, even though they've risen the interest rate since then here in the US.
Yeah.
A lot of the asset prices haven't fallen because of the amount of money that's still in the economy.
Mm.
So I think that there's a scenario where the US can hold interest rates here. And the way that they would be able to do that is if they implemented this technology and removed a lot of the inflation. You think about MasterCard and Visa, every transaction that you spend, it's 2 or 3%.
Mm-hmm.
What if that were to drop to like basis points?
Yeah.
That would save a lot of money. That would remove 2 or 3% worth of inflation across the economy almost immediately. And then you've got the velocity of money picking up. So you wouldn't have to lower the interest rates to incentivize money to move. You could just implement this technology. And that actually leaves us in a really healthy position. I would like, an economy operates, I think, best at somewhere between 4 and 6% interest. If you
Mm-hmm.
could hold your money in a bank and earn 4, 5%, pretty reasonable. I think most people would do that. And again, if we move to a situation where I don't want to say stuff is controlled, but at least has some oversight, you won't get these volatile swings, and there won't be all of this, you know, um, emotional market where things are overpriced or underpriced. It would be much more closer to the mean over time.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, to your point about utilizing this technology to curve the free up spending and to curve the inflation, do you think the first movers would be governments in terms of clearing their debts, their national debts?
Well, you could use it that way, and I think that's also orchestrated. So if government bodies and all of these institutions that are operating in the red and have large outstanding losses or large amounts of debt,
Hmm.
your balance sheet's two-sided, right? Like you have assets and liabilities. Right now, liabilities are way higher than assets. But if you happen to have something on your balance sheet that was going to move significantly higher in value because you used it, you wouldn't have to reprice it like you did gold in 30s in the 1930s here in the US. You could just start using the asset and it would continue to climb in value, and you could pull yourself out of the hole because now anytime you issued new debt, you would just borrow against the asset and move more on chain. And the more value you moved on chain, it would cause the price of the asset to continue to appreciate. And so by moving to blockchain and moving on chain with all these assets over the next 5 years to 10 years, I think 85% of all global assets will be tokenized by the end of 2030.
Yep.
You could absolutely pull yourself out of debt. And I think that's been the plan the whole time.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. I think the writing's on the wall, to be honest with you. I think there's been a shift for quite some time to say this is the end of fiat currency. I think that would be a nice segue into clearing a lot of national debt and having this mass adoption into people adopting a new form of currency. And I think, whether that's there seems to be, in my mind, there's going to be a split in society in terms of the CBDCs and people like yourself that have cryptocurrencies and or some other digital asset that they can monetize. So I got a couple more questions if you got some time.
Sure.
I wouldn't mind. I know you get a lot of critique online about selling hopium, about XRP, and like I said before, like being pre-rich, as my brother often says. We always talk about the shit we're going to buy when XRP moons. But I wouldn't mind understanding or at least getting your opinion if someone's listening to this and they're like, listen, I'm so frightened as to what to do and where to go. It's a conflict of values and interest in terms of one being sovereign and two, walking into this sort of digital ID, digital prison sort of thing. How much would someone need to invest in order to potentially have a reasonably good next 5 years in terms of a return or an asset class? I know you're obviously heavy on XRP, but you've mentioned a few that I've invested in, which is XLM, XDC, HBAR. You know, these sorts of
Yep.
different currencies. But give me an idea of how much someone would need to invest in terms of, say, price points. You know, what's your predictions towards the end of 2025?
I think the asset class as a whole could go up 100x pretty easily from here.
Shit.
So, the whole asset class for crypto today is around 4 trillion. I think it could easily be 400 trillion over the next 5 years, if not more. Um,
Incredible.
so if you're in the ones that stick around, probably going to do pretty good. And again, I think a lot of this will be through structured products, and the institutions will take their pound of flesh. There'll be fees. There'll be all the stuff that you're used to for how things tend to operate. And I know people are salty about the way things are. This is what I would say, and this is the reason I'm in this asset class. You can't change the way that things are until you have the relationships, the resources, and the clout to do so. Until you get a seat at the table, you have to play by the rules that exist today. This is an opportunity for a lot of people to get a seat at the table very quickly, and good people to get a seat at the table to make sure that moving forward, things are done the right way. So that's what I see in this asset class as an opportunity. The money's great. Don't get me wrong. Like, that'll be fun. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here for purpose. Money's a byproduct of that. So, like Elon, he's rolled it all multiple times. Elon doesn't care about the hundreds of billions of dollars that he has, which he doesn't even have. There's just in stock in his companies that he borrows against.
Yeah.
But he has a purpose. He's trying to get us to Mars. Like, that's his whole MO. It's what he wakes up every day thinking about. So I don't know what your purpose is, or anybody that's watching this, podcast. But if you could have more resources to accomplish that, this is a great opportunity to do it. If you are invested in the right assets, do your research to understand what's going on. And, I can't speak to what each one is going to do. I don't have I do have a crystal ball, but it doesn't tell me anything. So, I have my conviction. I have my position. We've bet a lot on that. And I think it's going to play out. I would say diversification is a hedge against ignorance. So if you're spread across multiple cryptos, and you have a bunch of different positions, more than 10, probably, I don't want to say too many, but it's hard to go deep enough on 10 different investments unless you got a lot of money to really make a difference. I think people would do better to pick. I mean, you can think about Warren Buffett, right? So Warren has Apple, Geico, See's Candy, and Coca-Cola. Like, those are his winners over the last 60 years of his investments. And he's produced 20% a year, like the most prolific investor of all time. And it's really been 4 investments that he's made. Mm-hmm. So if you think about yourself through the same lens, and you can have high conviction on 3 or 4 assets that are going to do really well, I think that that's a really good recipe to, garner whatever you need to live your passion on the other side of it.
What would those assets be?
I mean, a lot of the ones you mentioned, I think, are going to do pretty well.
Yeah.
So we talked about hash at the beginning of this.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably one most people haven't heard of. And again, not financial advice. Everything said here is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please consult with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions. My statements here are my own opinions. They're not the firm of the opinions of Digital Ascension Group or our wealth manager, Digital Wealth Partners. Sorry, I have to get my disclaimer in there. So yeah, hash, XRP, XLM, HBAR, Algorand, XDC. I don't know about quant. Jury's still out on quant for me. There'll be other ones like Electronium that I don't think most people look at. There'll be some other smaller market cap stuff. Polymesh is interesting. We've met their CEO, Proppy. I think will be around. Anything that has a real world application for tokenization of a specific niche or an asset class. A lot of people like Stronghold or Velo. Um, there's certain applications. Zbeck, I think, may end up being around too. Like, there's a lot of videos on my channel that I've made about different currencies. Ondo, I think, is in there.
Mhm.
Axelar, Wormhole. Um, I probably just named off 20,
Yeah,
right? Um, but I think there's probably 50 to 100 networks that subsist and are around after all this shakes out.
mm,
And if you can again figure out what those are before the reckoning that's coming, then you're going to do pretty well on the other side of it.
yeah. All right. And lastly, what's your price prediction for XRP?
What's the time frame?
I guess, look, for me personally, um, I don't know. I think a lot of people that I speak to that are in the market, they're hearing a lot about something that is going to happen towards the end of this year, um, and through to like 2030, I guess. I mean, that's a fairly broad time frame. Um, but I think for me, Jake, like I have, I guess, an idea in my mind that with the small amount of tokens that I have at the moment invested, if one or two moons, then I would like to maybe reallocate that asset, into
Yeah,
something like property or whatever, So I just feel like that diversification is going to be a benefit downstream, whether it be a business or any other asset class that can be utilized that way. So that way you've got multiple streams of income. Like that's kind of my thing, and then I can do this full time and go to the beach,
yeah.
and just live life,
Enjoy.
So yeah, absolutely, and provide for my family and my friends, and like I'm going to need an entourage to hang out with, So I wouldn't mind giving everyone a bag of money, and that way we can hang out at the beach together. So anyway,
Or they can just
um,
buy crypto with you, you know?
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah. Sounds good. So
so
anyway, let's say
XRP
like,
price prediction.
yeah.
Just ETFs, I think somewhere between 10 and $50 is very reasonable. If we get all of the other catalysts, and I think we will, again, I give it a 95% certainty that it happens this year.
Mhm.
You could easily have a 3 or 4 digit XRP by the end of 2025. 2026 to 2027, I think you'll see tokenization of derivatives, and that puts XRP at a 5 digit price.
Wow.
And then, beyond that, if you do have tokenization of real estate and all of these other real world assets, and 85% of that ends up on chain by the end of 2030, 6 figures by the end of 2030 for XRP. And then, if you wanted to go even further out, I do think that it'll reach the $1 million mark if you gave it a decade.
Really? Wow. Shit. That's exciting. Yeah. I know people, I don't want to sell people myself on hopium and things like that, but I think, like you said before, I think you need a seat at the table. And as much as I've been a huge proponent of putting an end to any kind of government control and tyranny as to what we've at least had a sample of over the last 5 years. I do think that a large part of everyone's freedom and sovereignty is tied to their wealth and their position as to what they can do. So, there's been markets like this, whether it's the .com or whether it's real estate or whether it's, you sold all your horses and started buying cars, like it doesn't matter what era you're in. I think there are moments like this that have happened throughout history, and history tends to repeat, right?
Yes, history doesn't always repeat, but it definitely rhymes.
I like that. That's awesome. All right. Well, listen, man, I'm sure you're going to send me all of your links and bits and
Mhm.
pieces for everyone to come and find out more about you. I've certainly really enjoyed how you deliver your content. I think that I don't know, you resonate, your values resonate with me. The way that you sort of deliver it is really calm and collected. It's not sort of hypey. You don't tend to rubbish too many other things. So I think like a lot of people in your space tend to get kind of I don't know, all high and mighty, and they get on their fucking soapbox about, you know, one particular thing and they poo-poo the others. And you do a really great job of balancing that all out. So I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate that. Thank you for that. Yeah. Well, I try to take a balanced approach to stuff and be logical and think through things clearly and try to be able to describe that in a way that's understandable for most other people. Um, one of my mentors said, if you can't explain it to a third grader, you don't understand it,
Yeah.
right? So if you can't simplify it for the average person, then you really don't know what you're talking about. But no, I really appreciate you having me on, and yeah, like you said, hopefully in the down bar below we'll have the links if people want to reach out, and we'd love to work with everybody or whoever wants to work with us.
Perfect. All right, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation and I hope we can circle back sometime in the future. But until then, I'll say farewell and I'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, brother. We'll see you.
Take care.